we flip the model. Everything that's happening in the world of AI and LLMs right now, I think is only going to accelerate the human part of the recruitment process. Ironically, cold calling is back in a big way. We're north of 10 million of ARR, and we are a heavily outbound sales-driven organization. The key is personalization and research. It's not about us, it's about them, it's about their problems and how we solve those problems. We really need to demonstrate value. Being a founder is one of the most humbling things you could probably ever do. We probably believed the hype a little bit too much. And it was amazing how people's perception of me changed. Gone are the days where growing headcount is like an attractive KPI for investors. Oh, the fundraising journey's been brutal for us. We had signed a term sheet for funds, and then a week before close they pulled the term sheet, which is such bad behavior.
Welcome to another weekly episode of Strategy and Tragedy. I'm your host, Stephanie Melodia, and after running my own business supporting founders and their scaling teams, I've created this show to share the realities of what it takes to build a startup today. As the name of the show suggests, Strategy and Tragedy is all about spotlighting the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, and the strategies and tragedies of business. Just before we get stuck into today's episode, I want to say a big thank you to you, first and foremost, for tuning in and supporting the show. It really does mean a lot to me, as it is such a privilege for me to sit down and interview some incredible guests. And with your support, I can hopefully continue to keep delivering education and inspiration to you along your own founder journey. So speaking of incredible guests, Mark Chaffey is the co-founder and CEO of hackajob, the candidate-centric platform for tech talent that puts the power back in the hands of the job seekers. He co-founded the business straight out of university, aged 20, and now leads the HRtech scale-up with $33 million in Series B funding under his belt, leading a team of 200 staff and turning over £10 million ARR with world domination firmly on the cards. Mark, welcome to the show.
Steph, thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure to have you, Mark. Okay, so obviously I kind of emphasised your age in your intro there. How wild is it that you're now a scale-up Series B CEO, never having had a real job yourself, right?
No, never had a real job. A few part-time jobs whilst I was at university, but never a full-time job.
And I just have to add to this as well, is not only have you not had a job, but the fact that you're leading like a talent. So you haven't had to go through the pains
Slightly ironic, I know,
of the recruiters. How do you think that has made you a better CEO?
I think that the way we run the company, we're not biased by how traditional things might be done. One phrase I use a lot internally, like it's the Wild West. We can do whatever we want to do. As long as we stay within the bounds of the law, we can run the company however we see fit. And I think what's been really fun as we've scaled is we've brought in experienced people. And they'll be like, why'd you do this? And I'm like, well, we just thought that was like the best way to do it. And obviously, as you scale and you get more people, it is important you start layering in some structure and some processes behind things. But I think that I just love not being tainted by doing things because that's the way it's meant to be done. And instead just thinking back to first principles, we're trying to solve a problem, what's the best way to tackle it?
I love that. Very eloquent. Makes a ton of sense when you phrase it like that. So I know that your co-founder approached you during your uni days, was like, hey, I've got this idea, let's make this happen. And now you so eloquently describe what you're doing at hackajob. So give us the elevator pitch, because you tell it so well.
Yeah, totally. Like our central thesis is that every company in the world is now a technology business. So technology has evolved from a standalone industry to a function that touches every industry. And therefore, the ability to engage, hire, retain technical talent is a bordering priority. Like if you don't have a great technical strategy, you're not going to be successful as an organization over the next decade. The challenge is the technical audience is a slightly different audience to maybe other job seekers. They know they have a lot of power. They're in a high demand, even with all of the changes that have happened over the last 18 months. And there's been a lot of changes in our world over the last 18 months, but there are still more jobs and candidates available. And so companies are really desperate to find a new way to engage this talent. And so what we've done is build this community now of over 500,000 users globally. And the magic behind what we do is we onboard users, we technically validate them. So we don't rely on the keywords in the CV. Instead, we'll actually understand how strong somebody is in a specific skill. They'll go for what we call a job fit process, which we're understanding their preferences. And if they pass our onboarding criteria, they're then visible to employers for a period of 4 weeks. And it's there we flip the model. So rather than the candidate applying to the job, the company makes the first move to the candidate, which creates this really magical candidate experience. Because if I'm a senior software engineer, I get spammed non-stop by mostly completely irrelevant opportunities. On hackajob, I only get pitched by companies that meet my salary, visa, location, tech stack, which creates super high engagement, which means companies get a 90% response rate to people they're reaching out to, which is way better than the likes of a LinkedIn. So that's what we do.
Yeah, amazing. So it candidate-centric, you put the talent first, which I love, makes complete sense. I remember hearing you talk about the fact that, tech talent aren't even really on like LinkedIn. And so you're creating that destination for them to converge and find relevant opportunities. You don't charge candidates anything. Your monetization is purely from the employers. So what have been some of the biggest growth levers for you? You've got some incredible stats, you've achieved some great things. I can see how it really works for the candidate side of things, but how have you kind of been able to unlock growth?
Yeah, the business model is quite innovative for the industry. So traditional staffing or recruitment companies will take a percentage of the candidate's first year salary and charge that to the employer, somewhere between 20 and 25%. Which, given the average salary hired on hackajob in the UK is £80,000, in the US it's about $170,000, these are huge fees. Instead, we've taken an approach of building a subscription model where the pricing scales through this concept of a successful match, which is effectively when an employer reaches out to the candidate and the candidate accepts that request. And what that enables is us to significantly reduce their cost per hire versus channels like using traditional recruiters and staffing agencies. And then because how engaged the talent pool is, the internal recruiters just love using the platform because rather than sending hundreds and hundreds of messages, they can do what they're uniquely gifted to do, which is create a great candidate experience. And everything that's happening in the world of AI and LLMs right now, I think is only going to accelerate the human part of the recruitment process. So yeah, that's really the business model is a real big growth lever for us.
So what I'm taking away from that there is you're essentially kind of undercutting, you're providing a cheaper alternative compared to the standard recruiter commission model, which was about bloody time. Secondly, you're providing such a great kind of user experience that you're driving up that engagement, people prefer to use it. So all of that sounds more kind of focused on the products itself, what you've built, which is phenomenal. What have been some of the most successful growth levers for you in terms of more the sales marketing? So obviously it does make the life a bunch easier when you've got a great product that's already resonating. Yeah. But then getting it out there, how did you go about doing that? Yeah,
totally. And it's, I guess, slightly unique that we're north of 10 million of ARR and we are a heavily outbound sales-driven organization. So 90% of our revenue is won by us prospecting companies. We've built a really, really strong SDR and AE team, and we'll use like a multi-channel approach, email, LinkedIn, phone. Ironically, cold calling is back in a big way. We'll book more meetings now over the phone than any other channel we use.
Interesting.
And so that takes a lot of craft. We have to build really great messaging behind that. But we've been able to scale to a really good amount of revenue from largely outbound. Now, we are evolving this year. We've just brought in a new head of marketing and we're really excited about building more of that inbound channel. But yeah, our go-to-market, it's amazing, is just very driven by outbound sales.
Okay, I love this. This speaks to my early days of my career where I used to be kind of pounding the pavements a little bit more. So let's kind of hang out in this area a little bit. So the cold calling, is there a script? Do they sound like cold callers? What do they say?
So I think that you don't want to use a script. It's so obvious. We get cold calls all the time, right? It's very obvious when somebody's reading from a script. The key is personalization and research. You've got to be able to grab someone's attention in 10 seconds and make it sound not like a cold call. We were joking earlier about tonality. Tonality is really important. Like, do you sound enthusiastic when you call? Or is this your 49th call of the day and you're like, oh, I actually hope this person doesn't answer because I can't be bothered to speak to someone. So I think tonality is really important. Doing a ton of research and making that hook really personalized to them. And you really need to understand your buyer. It's not about us, it's about them, it's about their problems and how we solve those problems. So that's kind of the training and enablement we'll do at a team.
I love this. I feel like we could definitely hang out here for a bit because it's a really funny one to talk about. And I think everyone relates to this. Like you said before, everyone has had like a cold call, like sales call. We know that it's a sales call. And I think that we can all learn what not to do with most of the terrible sales calls. I had I've had 2 really bad sales calls in the past week where it's just the opposite of what you said. It was just like, they've got a script to read. You can tell it's a script. They want what they want. Don't actually give what you want. Yeah. And it's just like firing something at you. And the questions that they've both asked me have been really easy for me to just dismiss.
Totally.
And then they've got nowhere to go because I'm like, no, I'm not interested. There's no budget. And I've literally said to them, you're wasting your time talking to me. Like, this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And they're like, but what about, I'm like, well, no, but, and they're like, and it's kind of like keeping you on the phone for like 2 more minutes to like hit the quota. So let's break down a little bit. So you said tonality is kind of one of the things. Have you heard of a guy called Sabri Subi?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, so check him out. He's like a bit of an influencer. He's from down under, and he shares all these like sales and marketing like tips and tricks and stuff. And there's this one video that he posted that really resonated with me, which was don't sound like a salesman.
Totally.
They can tell like you don't want to smell the desperation. So tonality that you mentioned, it's easy to come across as a salesperson if you are like overexcited, right? Overly enthusiastic. Yeah. So what exactly do you mean by like tonality on that one?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was actually doing a coaching session with a team literally on this topic today. And my mental model here is you want to be one level higher than the prospects you're speaking to. So if you're speaking to somebody that's like super dour and monotone, you don't want to go in there jumping and screaming. They're going to be like, whoa, so put off. You want to brighten that person's day up. You just want to bring a little bit of energy to them. So if you're selling a product into like a high energy persona and you know that like they're going to be like, I don't know, maybe you're selling a sales product to salespeople, you probably want to approach that with high energy. You want to like grab their attention, like, oh, wow, this is actually a fun conversation. I want to speak to this person. So I think it's about matching your persona's energy and just taking it a step higher. Now, that's harder on a cold call because you don't know what the person's tonality or their energy is going to be. But I think generally you want to bring positivity, you want to bring energy. But you're right, you don't want to lean into the cliche like wide boy salesperson sort of energy.
You still have to sound like a human.
Totally.
We've all got these different voices that we put on. I can't stand it.
Absolutely.
I cannot stand it.
It's a really important point is you need personality.
Yeah.
Right? So if you got each of our team to cold call you, they wouldn't sound the same, right? They're each different people. They've got their own personality and it's important you bring that to a call. I totally agree.
Okay. So your cold sales strategy, we'll talk about expanding out from the UK. I mentioned world domination before, so definitely want to talk about you going out into other markets. Maybe we can touch on the fundraising thing as well. But yeah, sticking with this for a quick sec, you can tell you've hit on an exciting point for me. What's the main goal of that sales call? Is it to open up like the conversation and get that continuity, or is it more about kind of closing the deal as quickly as possible?
No, all we're trying to do in a cold call or a cold email or a LinkedIn outreach or a video outreach is get a meeting booked on a calendar. So, if it's a cold call, we want 15 minutes of your time tomorrow, and we just want to be able to get that invite out on that call. From there, we'll then do, generally, if we can, a 30-minute session, which is just generally discovery. We want to understand what are their challenges, what are their pains, why did they reply to the email or take the call? And that will vary, but there's similar themes that we will hit on. And that might be 15, 20 minutes, that initial discovery call. We will then give them a general overview of what we do, quite high level, but enough to get them hooked. And the goal from there will then be to get them on a demo. And in the demo, is where the product really comes to life, because we'll take their real jobs, we'll put them on the platform, we'll show them real candidates, and we'll say, like, you could literally be interviewing this person tomorrow.
Yeah, super powerful.
Yeah, and that's really where you can see the penny drop at that moment. We like a trial. So generally with customers, we will do some type of trial period. That might be a week, it might be 30 days. We're quite a high ACV product for our industry. So our ACV is about 75K. And so that means we really need to demonstrate value. And the trial model is a really nice way of doing that. And then from the trial, they'll move on to an annual subscription. And that's all taken care of by our new business team. And then once they're a customer, they'll then go over to our customer success team to manage and grow the account.
Yeah, makes sense. And how far do you go with tailoring your ICP?
Yeah, it's really interesting, different with the UK and the US, but we're a very enterprise-driven organization. So about 85% of our revenue is from our enterprise segment. A little bit like I touched on in the intro, we're very industry agnostic. Because now technology touches every industry, we'll work with big financial services businesses, obviously big tech companies, defense and space, etc. And then we know who our persona is. They're going to be a director of talent acquisition who's ultimately going to be signing off the budget. It's going to be technical recruiters that are using the solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
Quick one. If you're a budding entrepreneur currently enjoying strategy and tragedy, then I have another great podcast for you to check out. Hosted by fellow podcaster James Mitra, 40-Minute Mentor is the go-to place for founder inspiration. Described as a pocket-sized UK's career mentor, the podcast is on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders. Now in their 11th season, 40-Minute Mentor guests include mission-driven entrepreneurs, investors, and even Olympic champions, all sharing their journeys and what it takes to be brilliant, all in just 40 minutes. So make sure you tune in straight after this episode by searching 40-Minute Mentor wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's get back into the show.
All right, so coming back to kind of more of your founder journey, I am fascinated by the fact that you did this kind of straight out of uni, and the benefits that you describe, they make sense because you've just got that freshness. You haven't been kind of shaped into this is the way that things are done. So you go out there and write your own rule book. What have been some of the stumbling blocks for you along the way?
Yeah, totally. I think being a founder is one of the most humbling things you could probably ever do. I look back at my 20-year-old self and I was like a cocky, arrogant guy that thought I had cracked everything. And so like that humility is a real thing. And do you know what, honestly, like one of the biggest challenges has probably been, the last 12 months. It's like tough in the market right now. You have to acknowledge that. And I think something that I'm always very comfortable with other founders is being super vulnerable. Like this is not the TechCrunch article, and it was funny for so long, we weren't the TechCrunch company. And I was like, those guys just always getting those TechCrunch articles. And then
right.
we did a great round last year. We got the TechCrunch article. And it was amazing how people's perception of me changed. They were like, oh my God, you've nailed it. And I'm like, no, guys, that's a headline. That's not the reality of the business. And, I made the mistake that I think a lot of founders made in 2022. We got caught up in our own momentum. We probably believed the hype a little bit too much. And I think we got caught up in what I call momentum hiring, right? Everything was up and to the right. Business is going phenomenally well. Somebody else more headcount. You just say, yes, hire that person, off we go. And I think that meant that combined with a predominantly remote culture, we didn't have any performance management in place. And suddenly you go from a team of 50, 70 people where I knew everyone in the business and it was like you could just kind of shout and things would get done, to go to like 150 people and then scale was like, we're going to make some mistakes here. So we had to resize, we had to reorg and actually think about reporting lines and what does the company look like. Launching the US adds more complexity to the org structure. And since then, we've hired a phenomenal director of people who's really brought in a great performance management culture, or not culture, I guess more methodology behind how you build high-performing teams, which I think is so relevant now. Gone are the days where like growing headcount is like an attractive KPI for investors. It used to be like number one on the board there. Oh my God, we hired 20 people this quarter. Now it's like, you've got to do more with less. And so I think performance management has become critical over the last 6 to 12 months.
So where do you turn to for guidance? Do you have a board? Do you have a mentor? Do you listen to podcasts?
Yeah, I love reading and listening to podcasts. Like I am obsessed with reading. I'll always be reading something. I love memoirs. That's like my favorite type of book to read.
What's your favorite?
There's a biography, so not a memoir, written by Andrew Roberts on Winston Churchill, which is like a 750-page book. I read it on a holiday in Lake Garda in COVID. And it is genuinely the most fascinating book I've ever read in my life, because you're learning so much about history and World War II, and obviously Winston Churchill's a very, very interesting character. So that's phenomenal. The classics in the kind of memoir biography space, Ride of a Lifetime, Bob Iger's book, I think is incredible. That guy maybe not had a great comeback at Disney, but that deal-making era he went on at Disney is like, so inspirational. So love podcasts, love books acquired from a podcast perspective. They do like 4-hour deep dives of companies, which is like super nerdy that I love. And then like something I did the end of 2021 was I realized like I'm deeply unqualified for my job. Like the business was growing. I'd never run a team this big before, etc. So I got a coach. And I deliberately chose a founder that had done like one stage ahead of me, a guy called Tony Hunter, who co-founded a business called Attest. And he was the start of me building what I call like my external exec team. And I think so much of the challenge with advice and guidance is that it's generic. And VCs are an interesting bunch. But when we went fundraising, it's an amazing amount of people that would just quote what Bill Gurley tweeted the night before, right? And it's not relevant to our business. There's no context behind it. So what I've tried to do with this like external exec team is get them close to the company. So in the UK, I do a lot of work with Tony, a guy called John White, who was instrumental in pulling off our Series B. In the US, we've brought a guy called Josh Gamble really close to us. These guys are really experienced operators that have built much bigger companies than me, but they have the context of our business. They know our exec team. They know when I'm going through some challenges, they can be like, I can understand why that person might be doing this, or that might be a challenge of this customer, etc. So we've really lent into that over the last couple of years.
But that makes sense. And I just want to drill into the real, like the realities, the practicalities of this. Do you pay your executive board a salary?
Interesting. So that external exec team, they are paid a retainer on a monthly basis. We then have our obviously internal exec team obviously paid a salary. And then we do have a board as well. So on our board, we have Sean, who led our Series B, and Imran, who led our Series A. Sean from Volition, Imran from AXA Venture Partners. Phenomenal guys. Prior to closing our Series B, I'd never ran a board meeting in my life. We now do them quarterly, and it's amazing. They are tough. They will give me really hard feedback, but they will always end by saying, Mark, we're backing you. We trust you. You're the right person to lead this company. We'll take your decision and we'll back you. And I think that's exactly what you want from your investors in your board.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's quickly touch on expanding out from the UK. Cool. I know this is going to be a bit of a shorter and sweeter episode, so I want to try and pack in as much as we can. Was that a conscious decision to move out from the UK? Was the US next? Was that intentional?
Yeah, for sure. I think if we're going to get to 100 million ARR, we have to get the US right. It's the biggest market in the world for hiring. It's one of the biggest markets in the world for tech talent. We did try France and Germany. I think there's some real challenges with localization, and one of my thesis on why UK businesses maybe haven't reached a scale as a lot of our US counterparts is just how hard it is to go international. You have to go international pretty early as a UK business because the TAM here isn't that big for a lot of industries. So, if you're a US business, you can probably go international when you're at 50 million of ARR. Whereas in the UK, I feel like you have to do it pretty early. So yeah, US is a very conscious decision. We got the initial strategy probably completely wrong. We thought we could just tackle the entire US. You don't quite realize how big the US is until you're there, which is very naive, I know. But it's been super fun. We've been there now, 18 months or so, and it's been a great lesson.
I know that you're often back and forth between London and New York, so I'm guessing was New York the first place to focus on for you guys?
Yeah, exactly. So we've built the team in New York. It is a phenomenal city. I love London. I spent 10 years in London. I probably spend about 75% of my time now in New York, and I think it's a lot of fun. Talent's incredible. And yeah, it was where we initially won our first customers. We're now in 10 different states in the US.
So what kind of came first with the chicken and egg here? Did you select that particular location, or were you already seeing some growing demand and you followed the early customers overseas?
Yeah, one thing we're super fortunate by is because we work with enterprise businesses, we were only supporting them in the UK, but like 50% of our customers were hiring in the US. So we took 20 of our existing customers, launched the US with them. So whatever demand they had, we'd then build the supply around them. And then we're able to scale from there. And 2 weeks ago, we launched India and we did the exact same thing. We went to our existing customers, who's hiring in India? Great, give us your jobs, we'll build the talent pool around it, which really helps us solve the chicken and egg marketplace problem.
Yeah. A lot of what you share, Mark, you do make it sound so easy.
It's not, I promise.
I totally believe you, but I guess having $35 million under your belt kind of helps with that process. Yeah. Were there any surprises, challenges along the way on the fundraising journey?
Oh, the fundraising journey has been brutal for us. I'll be quick, but in 2022, we'd signed a term sheet with a fund, and then a week before close, they pulled the term sheet, which is such bad behavior. And at that point, we maybe had 3 or 4 month runway. And then when we pulled off the Series B early 23, that was 78 first meetings to get to 5 term sheets to go with Volition. So yeah, it was a brutal process. Volition were phenomenal. We'd known them for a long time. They've been tracking us for a while, which was great. But yeah, fundraising is brutal. It's not fun. I really don't enjoy it. It's not why I do this. I think some founders are unbelievable at it, and I've got so much respect for people that are. I'm way more interested in company building.
I mean, I think the same could be said of most founders. They go into business to solve a particular problem, don't they? It's not to schmooze venture capitalists.
Totally.
What did that do to you emotionally when you had your term sheet pulled a week out from the due date?
I think it's one of those things that you just instantly have to go to problem solving mode. You almost don't even have time to process it and get emotional. It's just instantly like, okay, cool, this is now a problem. How are we going to solve it? And I'm not sure that's particularly healthy. I'm a big guy into therapy. I'm very happy to talk about that. And it's something we often talk about is being a founder, you kind of need to be numb to things. You need to be able to be quite even keeled. The highs are never as good as they are and the lows are never as bad as they are. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate to have a phenomenal VP of finance in Taz. And we just got to work on, okay, well, how are we going to solve this problem? And fortunately, some of our existing investors were investing as part of the round. And we ended up doing a CLN with them to give us a bit more time, which then convertible loan note. So basically, they invested the amount they were going to, but rather than pricing a new round, It was a debt instrument that will convert into equity when we close the deal with Volition.
Mm-hmm. Did you kind of get a delayed, like, emotional processing? Like, like you've got to sort it out in the moment. You got to.
Yeah, I think that it's so interesting. That was, I don't know, December 10th, maybe 22. And then we were able to set out the CLM before Christmas. So that was pretty quick. And then we went straight back into fundraise mode. The way the CLM was structured, the investors heavily encouraged us through some pretty aggressive terms to make sure we got a round done quickly. And I remember it was literally almost a year to the date when we closed the deal with Volition, and I was sat by myself in New York in a hotel lobby. And yeah, then I was emotional. Like when that actually round came, and I remember FaceTiming my mum and dad. And yeah, that was quite emotional.
This is just what I'm thinking, not to, ask you such a leading question, but I definitely relate to, like, when there's a problem in the moment, you're just in problem solving mode, you can't afford to get emotional. But then kind of when everything calms down, it's then kind of, oh my God. Mark, thank you so much for your very valuable time. It's been wonderful to get at least a bit of a taste of some of your entrepreneurial journey. I wish I could ask you many more questions, but just to wrap today's short and sweet interview with our traditional closing question, strategy and tragedy is called that because often the best lessons can come from the biggest mistakes or tragedies, so to speak. What has been one particular tragedy that's taught you an unforgettable lesson?
I think, honestly, what we were just touching on with the investor putting the term sheet, I think is by far and away the hardest thing that we've had to go through because it was existential. We had like 90 days cash in the bank. And I think the lesson through that process is you have to do DD on investors pretty thoroughly. We did a few background checks on them, and it was interesting. And actually, one of the background checks, one of the founders said they are really tough in the deal, but they're great on your cap table. I won't say who the fund is. I don't think it's necessary. So I think that was a brutal lesson to learn. And like I said, it could have cost us the business. Now, like I said, you kind of go into problem-solving mode and you just try and find solutions. But I think any founder that's out there fundraising, there can be this weird power dynamic between founders and investors. And as founders, we can often think investors have all the power. But that's not true, actually. It's their job to deploy capital. It's our job to build great companies. I think being comfortable challenging investors, being able to be quite confrontational in the fundraise process is something that we certainly did the next time around. And like I say, Taz, our VP of Finance, was phenomenal in supporting me in that.
Amazing. Mark, I'm so blown away. I feel like you must have had at least 10 past lives. You're definitely wiser, way beyond your years. Thank you so much for sharing some of that with us. It's been really, really interesting, really inspirational and insightful. So thank you so much again, Mark.
Steph, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for listening. Really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Do hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. Tune in to next time. Episodes are weekly and hopefully see you there. Thanks a lot.